My name is Piotr Walewicz. I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Political Science and Administration at the University of Kazimierz Wielki. It is my great pleasure to welcome a distinguished guest I will be interviewing today. His name is Professor Oriol Marquet from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, working at the Institute of Environmental Science and Technology and with the Urban Mobility Research Group. Let's start. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Start by telling us a bit about yourself, about your academic career. How did you get to the place you are at right now?
Sure. As you said, I'm based in Barcelona in the Autonomous University. I'm based mainly on the geography department. I'm a geographer. And I study things related to daily mobility, transportation, and basically travel behavior. But travel behavior not from a perspective of infrastructure or trains or highways or this road infrastructure that sometimes we think of when we think about transportation, but I'm more interested in the human part of transportation. So why do we make the decisions that we make on a daily basis? Why do we choose to go to the places we want to go? And why do we choose to use the modes of transport that we choose, right? And because all of these decisions are very spatial based, are dependent on the environment on which we live, the cities on which we live, the places we have to access on a daily basis, that is a very geographical concept. And I, as a geographer, I'm interested in these links between the space, the environment, and the human behavior and the decisions that we make. And these I apply it to the travel behavior field and the transportation field. And in my research, I started from geography department in Spain that has quite a good tradition of studying these things, and I started focusing on a very micro element. My PhD in geography focused on a very micro element of the travel behavior, which were trips that were very, very short. Mm-hmm. So I was interested in studying trips that were mainly unnoticed in the data or in the way that we planned transportation, because we are always thinking, when we're planning transportation, we are always thinking on those trips that take 1 hour, 2 hours, or take a lot of time or distance to get to work, for example. Mm-hmm. But what happens with all the other trips that we take on a daily basis that are important for us, from getting groceries to visiting your grandma to going to the gym, that might be covered in, 5-minute walk, 10-minute drive. They are short in distance, short in time, and they take a lot of importance in our daily lives, but in the traditional way of studying transportation, they had not been addressed that much. Mm-hmm. And so my PhD was on uncovering how many of these micro-scale trips there were in the Barcelona area, it's where I'm from. And from that, I started, a research line that has tried to link this travel behavior, this sustainable travel behavior, these short distance mobilities with the urban environment, and trying to understand, okay, what type of cities we can build so these micro trips that are so necessary in our daily lives can be done by walking or by cycling, which are the transportation modes that are more sustainable and more accessible to the overall population.
Okay. What brought you to this topic of research? Was it a problem you saw in your own environment or something else?
Well, I could give you like a broad response, an idealistic response, or actually what happened. And what happened was that I started my PhD without really knowing what to do. So my first months in the PhD were purely exploring possibilities. Mm-hmm. And it came through my supervisor's My supervisor is Carmen Miralles in Barcelona. She has a long history of researching these human scale needs and these travel behavior patterns. And I was more, drawn towards the big things, the traditional going to work, these kind of things. And she was the one telling me, you are dismissing a very important part of mobility, and you should be looking at these small scale everyday decisions that we make, because that's where the interest is right now. We already have a lot of research on the commuting, going to work, this kind of research on travel behavior. What we need is new research on this other unexplored path. And I started a little bit reluctant because that was not my original idea. But then I saw that yes, these micro trips are very interesting because they are very deeply influenced by the urban environment on which they take place. And so it's very different to live in an urban environment where you have a compact city with sidewalks, with a lot of shops, with a lot of people in the street. In that environment, you get walking only naturally, right? I need to go from A to B, and my most natural way to do that in that environment will be walking, right? But take that same trip, same distance, same origin, destination type, and put it in a more suburban setting. Your preferred modal choice, so the choice of your transportation mode would not be walking, for sure. It will be the car, right? So I realized that through the study of these micro trips, I could really investigate what I wanted, which was the relationships between the urban form, the built environment design, the urban characteristics, and the actual travel behavior. And that's where I got excited by the topic, really, and that's where it all started.
Okay, what would be the idealistic answer?
The idealistic answer is that that more research really is needed on that part, and that but that's very difficult to realize for a first-year PhD student. That's why it's very important to have a good mentorship, because mentors have the experience to really say, okay, don't get to the flashy topics that everybody is studying. Why don't you take that approach? And then the ability here by the mentor is you just plant the seed into the PhD student mind or master student mind and see if that person gets excited by the topic and makes it his own, right? So this dual task of the mentorship, providing guidance, and the student or the mentoree, making that topic his, or that's the key part of research, I would say.
I can totally empathize with not knowing what to do during the first year of the PhD. I had the same history with, I completely switched the topic of my thesis after the first year, after meeting my new mentor. And I guess it's a good insight for all the PhD students out there.
Exactly.
That it's normal. It's very natural to.
It's normal, and also you start the PhD trying to solve the world and asking the big questions, and then you start to realize that the big questions are not up to you to answer, and you're just going to have to collaborate with a piece of smaller research question, and that's good enough because it's the collective production of smaller research questions that get us to the big issue. It's I think it's a normal pathway for PhD students, but also something that is difficult in that moment that you start something new. You want to really solve a lot of big problems, things that you have read in the literature, etc., and you have to take a step back and say, okay, let's start through here, and I will get to that big topic later.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting we will be giving career advice, but it's great that we did. Okay, let's now get back to your research, and now I have a really big challenge for you. I want to talk about the 15-minute city concept, and since not everybody could attend or listen to your lecture yesterday, I would like you to very briefly, like in 5 minutes,
Okay.
present the concept, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I will try that. Okay, 15-minute cities. 15-minute cities have become very popular because it's a very easy urban planning concept for people to understand. We are just trying to make everything that people need in their daily lives, like as persons we need to get to grocery shopping, we need to go to work, we need to get to study places, the college or the school, we need to get to healthcare facilities sometimes. And these destinations that we really need to access through our daily lives can be either very sprawled and very distant from our homes, or can be very close from our homes, right? And until now, urban planning had decided that the location, the distribution of these things that we need could be anywhere in the territory, because by using public transportation or by using your car, you could have access to those places. And so accessibility, so the degree of access by which you could reach a hospital, for example, could be provided by building a train station in that hospital, a metro station, or by building a new highway or a new road to that hospital. But that creates, or has created, a lot of pressure on mobility, right? There's a lot of mobility needs. There's a lot of people that need to go to very distant places, and that creates a lot of pressure for public transportation and a lot of pressure for cars, right? We have a ton of car dependency because the places where we need to go are spread too far out. In here, we have an obvious problem when we enter the sustainability paradigm, the need to reduce car use, etc. So the answer cannot be to continue to provide accessibility by investing in roads, by investing in trains. The answer has to be, okay, let's try to concentrate a little bit more these daily destinations so we can ensure that everybody can have access to the basic needs that they have in more or less 15 minutes. That's the idea. So we should be planning cities in order to get the majority or as many people as possible in our city to have access to their daily needs in less than 15 minutes. Now there's a catch in there, because 15 minutes by car, it's a lot of kilometers. Yeah. 15 minutes by walking, it's a very reduced distance, more or less a kilometer, okay? So the city that wants to do a true 15-minute city will aim for 15 minutes walking distance or cycling distance. And they plan for a lot of concentration of people, so higher population densities, and a lot of concentration of amenities, so land use mixes. What we want is that people live in places where there's also shops, there's also services, there's also jobs, right? That would be the ideal thing, because when you overlap the distribution of the population and the distribution of the services, you get closer distances between one of the other, and you can reach 15 minutes walking cities, right? The opposite would be a city that is really, really spread out and cannot achieve a truly 15-minute walking city. They might think on a softer alternative, would say, okay, let's build, for example, a 15-minute city that is based on cycling. Cycling distances are larger, and you can have, it's less demanding from the urban planning perspective. But getting back to urban planning, and I understand that I'm getting too long in my answer, getting back to urban planning, just changing the switch here and saying, okay, the important indicator in urban planning is how much it takes for people that live in these areas to reach to whatever they need to do. That's a very important switch from the way that we had planned cities for a lot of years. And this switch is catching on a lot of cities that are trying to say, okay, that's an interesting concept. It's a concept that people can understand, and it's a concept that we can try to implement in our places. So it has been very, very popular around the world. And I was mentioning in my talk yesterday that almost 100 cities only in Europe have devised some kind of 15-minute city plan or are working towards it.
Okay, let's start with structural constraints, because I want to come back to the words of the president of Bydgoszcz from yesterday's inauguration, who said that the concept is great, but it's difficult to implement in cities which are already built and have a very dense structure. So how can we provide all those services to people when we have no place to put them in?
Correct. I agree with what he said. It's a sensible matter. But what we should consider is that 15-minute cities is not the end goal. It's not like you either are a 15-minute city or you don't. It's just a progress. And whatever city we are, we can advance towards more proximity and towards shorter distances, shorter travel distance. So for example, in the case of Bydgoszcz, there's areas here that I'm sure, I haven't studied, but I'm sure already comply with the 15-minute city concept. I'm sure the city center is very well covered in terms of services, has very good population density, and has a good land use mix. So I'm sure the center of Bydgoszcz can be considered a 15-minute city already. Now, in other areas, there's going to be areas that are super difficult, like the classical suburbs on which these are residential homes with low density and almost completely residential. That's going to be difficult. The challenges in there would be to try to increase density a little bit more, try to promote a mixture of building typologies, not only single family housing, but the idea being that if you increase population density, if you put one service, the gym, grocery shopping, etc., around that area, more people will benefit from that service. Okay, that would be on the extreme side. And then there's other neighborhoods that are not the city center and not the low density suburb that will be somewhat in the middle. And in those neighborhoods, probably the most sensible approach would be try to strengthen land use mix. Try to avoid the things that we have now, which is, okay, this part is completely residential, this part is completely shopping, right? Because when you have this separated, if this population want to access this service, they only they are mandatory using the car or the public transportation. Try to mix a little bit more. And this can start with very small things, right? Allowing a license for the first ground floors to become shops, for example, or trying to convert some more areas to housing in areas that are already shopping, right? These small things are not big issues. They will not make the headlines because it's not a great project. It's a small work on trying to improve both density and land use mix. And once you get that, things will start coming around.
Yeah, I like that it's probably a kind of domino effect, where when you don't have these areas separated, you mix them, people don't have to go there by car, so we need less parking space. So we have more space for everything else, like green areas.
Absolutely, and when you have some people walking, walking becomes more attractive. As humans, we are attracted to the places where other humans are. Like the beauty of public space and big squares and nice public spaces that we might think of is that it's where everybody is. And you go there almost people watching, right? You stroll, you walk around because you like the environment of walking around. It's very different, the walking experience, from being, I don't know, walking in a sidewalk next to 3 lanes of cars than from walking in a nice area where there's other actual people walking. There's safety in numbers, so you feel more safe because you are more surrounded by people. And it's a domino effect, that's a very good point, in terms of a little bit will bring more next. And that way, with small changes, we can advance towards the 15-minute city goal. But again, we are advancing. There's no need to become like 15, 14, 13-minute cities. It's just progress towards increased proximity and the benefits that this increased proximity can have for people's daily lives.
Okay, I really like that it's not a binary solution. You either are a 15-minute city or you're not. It's a process, right? And it's hopeful for many European cities, for all of European cities who already exist, right? And don't really have much available options to transform the structure much. But staying in the topic of structural constraint or lack thereof, what do you think about projects like Masdar City?
I think there's no there's no silver bullet solutions. And these big projects are, I think they are using sustainability topics and arguments to justify a purely investment real estate development, right? I think this is not the solution for the future of cities. Most of the urban world is already urbanized. And urban growth worldwide is not happening through newly built cities. This might be true in the Middle Ages, but right now it's not. Where the true challenges are okay, established cities are growing. What happens with these growth patterns that are happening around these areas, right? And these newly built suburbs that can take very easy one direction of path dependency, sprawl, distances, or with a little bit of planning and a little bit of effort in forecasting these new housing demands, we can build new neighborhoods attached to traditional cities that can comply with this land use mix and this density that we need. That's also an important point of the 15-minute cities. 15-minute cities it's important not only because some mayors want to become 15-minute cities, but because we are educating policymakers, planners, citizenship about the benefits of proximity and about the need for urban planning that not leads us to a car-dependent path. Because once we are on a car-dependent path, once we get these cities already built, once we get already people living in these car-dependent suburbs, then it's super difficult to come back to a more sustainable mobility pattern. There's this big saying, or famous saying, I don't recall who said it first, but said something like that, that the best transportation plan is actually a land use plan. So the best thing that you could do to get sustainable transportation is think about the urban planning first. Because once you get a good enough urban planning on which car it's not the only option that citizens have, then you get to play with transportation policies that can change the pattern of people. But without the minimum amount of proximity, of land use mix, of services available nearby, nobody's going to walk or nobody's going to cycle. It doesn't matter how good it looks or how much education you put on those people. And getting back to your original question of the master city, I think this is just these are just showcases for neoliberal developments that they want to attract investment from the global financial markets. And I could say the same, not only from Master City, but for several years ago, there were these ideas of let's build a new smart city from scratch. Google will develop their own smart city and it will be perfect. This is so minor in scale compared to the big reality that is the urban development worldwide, that it's useful just as a money maker, not really.
Let's stay with the cars for a bit. Some time ago, I came across a master's thesis from Canada about automobile realism. So the concept that we are so tied to our cars, and they've become part of our identity, and we can't really imagine our lives without using cars. That it's very pessimistic about any kind of change, big transformation in mobility. So on one hand, we have structural constraints, which you've said we can overcome, at least partially, but then we have mental constraints. And even here in Bydgoszcz, my colleague, Dr. Martyna Kwiatek, researched the citizens of Bydgoszcz, and when she asked them what do they like the most about the development of Bydgoszcz, the majority of them pointed at new roads, better roads, wider roads.
Yeah.
So it's very ingrained in our
Absolutely.
heads.
We have what most people would say car brain, right? And there's this motonormativity that we have, that car has become so ingrained in our daily lives that we think that we can make without a car, right? I would say that's not a natural thing. It's been a product of advertisement, cultural values, a product of our capitalistic system that has made the car like the ultimate consumption piece, right? And we express ourselves through our cars. Our lifestyle can be expressed. Who we are can be expressed on whether if I drive a BMW or another kind of car. These kind of things have become very important. But this is not natural, right? And by showing people that another lifestyle can be possible, I think there's room for change in the future, right? I'm particularly interested in the change of values that come from more people valuing urban lifestyles, right? Because urban lifestyles, which are based on diversity, based on being able to access a lot of different things in a nearby distance, by having a lot of people around you. They are very different from the suburban lifestyles that are based on, okay, I'm going to have my home as a center of my life, and then I will use the car to access the suburban shopping mall, my work, etc. Right? I think there's a revival of the urban lifestyle through the new generations, through also cultural icons that have expressed themselves through the valuation of these lifestyles within cities. And I think there's also a realization that the costs of this suburban lifestyle, the car-oriented mindset, are huge. You have to spend a lot of time in your car, actually. You have to, whatever you do, you need to use the car. And is that freedom, really? The freedom was maybe in the earlier developments of the car industry, on which car provided you with easier access to the things that you could not have accessed. But right now, we have built our society around cars so much that car, it's not freedom. Car is your only option. If you, in a lot of cities, if you don't have a car and you don't use it daily, you won't access the good gym, the good job, your social ties, it's a requirement, right? And I think this can be changed. We should change it. We know as scientists should change it. And the people that live it, I think when they experience the other side of car dependency, and they experience the pleasure of not having to drive every day as the only option that you have, people get in love with that other side of lifestyle. I think there's a lot of room to grow in that aspect.
Okay, so then it's not really a left versus right issue, right? It's an issue of revealing to people that their way of life has someone else's interests in mind, and it's a fight also against consumptionism.
And one way to do that is to make people understand that nothing is free, and that from many years we've been subsidizing your car-oriented lifestyle. All the societies, so everyone through their taxes have funded cars, roads, tolls, bridges. All the car infrastructure that you've seen around you has been paid by everyone through their taxes, regardless if they have a car, if they own a car, or if they use a car. If we start to change this and make car users pay more for their use of this infrastructure, people might realize that this car thing that has become so ingrained to our lifestyles is not completely free. This is already happening. For example, cars are now much more expensive than they used to be. People start realizing, wow, how much of my family budget goes towards paying a car, right? If we start, as the European Union wants to do, if we start making cars pay for their travel distances, for example, you have to pay for your emissions, your externalities that you are causing through the use of your car, car driving will become more expensive. When a couple years ago there was that spike in the price of gas, for example, people started realizing, oh wow, the amount of car use that I'm used to have, it's really expensive. So should I really be paying that much for having access to a car? Or maybe I can reinvest the money that I'm using for the car to public transportation or to living, for example, in a more accessible place on which maybe I pay a little bit more of rent, but I live in an area that is much more accessible and I can use other modes of transportation and I don't have to pay the car, for example.
Okay, so eventually it will be an individual decision of each of us what mode of transportation we choose, but what do we do if the city around us is not a 15-minute city and doesn't intend to be, and we feel powerless, and we participate very little, and this is also the case of Bydgoszcz, which also was revealed through the research of the colleague I mentioned. People really don't feel much empowerment as citizens. So, is the 50-minute city concept somehow more empowering the people and making them participate more readily in the urban policies?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, I would say, first of all, these things are political. So you might think that your mayor is not interested in these topics, but this can be changed through voting, right? And so there's two things. First of all, you have to vote for the type of urban planning that you want in local elections. And second, urban planning has a long tradition of being dictated by social movements. So when a neighborhood association starts demanding things to their local representative, the local representative will be aware of these problems. So through the local associations, we can get our demands higher up the ranks and start influencing our local policies. The other part is that 15-minute cities get more proximity, and so in areas that are more, that you get people walking more often, neighbors also know each other more often. And so what we've seen is that in areas that are compact and they're like 15-minute cities, there's more associations going on in there, and they can have more political voice and more political power. But in the terms of 15-minute cities, what you can do, as we said in the beginning, 15-minute cities is not a binary thing. It's not saying to your mayor, I want to be a 15-minute city. It's like, okay, I think my neighborhood would benefit from having a new restaurant built, and I know that person, that businessman, would like to open a restaurant in my neighborhood, but right now zoning laws don't allow that, for example. I'm just generating an example. I can go to my mayor and say, hey, changing the zoning law in my neighborhood would benefit me personally, not only because I get a restaurant nearby, and that's important, but would also benefit my city, because now we would be progressing towards this 15-minute city ideal. That way, I don't need to use my car for 30 kilometers to access a new pizza shop, because I have a new small restaurant in my suburban location that I can go to, maybe not every week, but maybe one out of, I don't know, once per month. And this once per month is one less car trip that I have to do. And these little by little steps would go towards more land use mix, which is super important in travel distances.
Okay, I really like this insight and the idea that the 15-minute city is neither a top-down policy nor a bottoms-up policy, but it's about networking people and working together and establishing those relationships and learning about each other and our needs. This is great. Okay, so this was a bit of optimism. Let's put some pessimism also in here. Does every city have a potential to progress towards the goals of a 15-minute city, or are some cities just so badly planned and so unsustainable? What comes to my mind is Phoenix. Is there any hope for cities like Phoenix?
That's a very good example. Okay, I think it depends on what we define as success in this case. Will Phoenix ever be a 15-minute city like, I don't know, Barcelona, where I come from, where 50% of all the trips that are made by walking, for example? No, I don't think that's feasible, and we would be fooling ourselves. Can Phoenix improve? Yeah, sure, it can, right? So it depends. I don't like to seeing 15-minute cities as an end goal, as I said. I want it to be like a staircase on which every city, whatever the starting point is, can improve. Because right now Phoenix might have, and I'm just guessing here, 10% of walking trips. 10-15%, I don't think it would be lower, because walking is really very unrepresented in data, and walking is present almost everywhere that you look. And not only that, but not everyone can have access to cars. So there's always much more people walking than you think. But can Phoenix improve that 15% of walking that we said? Yes, it can. And even in the suburbs, we can invest in, as I said, for example, zoning laws and promoting that small businesses. I say small because if there's a very small population density, we cannot expect a big business to thrive only on local customers, right? But if these businesses are small, maybe they can thrive through local customers, like a neighborhood shop. Only just having a neighborhood shop that has the basics, like the pasta, some beverages, and salt and pepper, right? That small neighborhood shop will make that some of that suburban residents that would say, oh, I'm missing some eggs today, I need to go to Walmart to get them, the big grocery shop that is 30 kilometers away, I need to use the car. No, maybe I can walk by my neighborhood shop, or bike to the neighborhood shop, or even drive to the neighborhood shop. But it's not a 30 kilometers drive. Now it's a 1 kilometer drive. That's also a change, right? So there's always point of improvement, no matter where the city starts from. Now, is that a 15-minute city? No, it's not a 15-minute city, but it's progress towards a 15-minute city. So I'm very opinionated on the fact that we should drop this idea that 15-minute cities are only the ideal, well-designed cities, etc. No. The 15-minute city pathways includes all cities, no matter the starting point.
Okay, great. This is a very good conclusion for talking about the concept of 15-minute cities. You're not allowing me to be pessimistic.
No, I'm not.
I have to be optimistic about it. Let's wrap up with talking a little bit about your plans for the future. Is there much more work to do, research to do on 15-minute city project, or maybe is there something else you'd like to do?
Yeah, I think the 15-minute cities topic is starting to change. Like we've had a first wave of research that has been very devoted to diagnosing the conditions of accessibility in cities. So plenty of studies saying, is Barcelona a 15-minute city? Is Milan a 15-minute city? What needs Munich? What does Munich needs to do to become a 15-minute city? This was the first stage. The second stage is starting right now and is saying, okay, how are 15-minute city-like conditions really changing travel behavior? So where are the exact measurable benefits of living within these areas? And within that, we've got some very good research, very positive research in terms of, okay, those who live in areas that are, we could say that they are 15-minute cities, are having much more sustainable travel behaviors than others, right? And improving the conditions of the city is also improving the sustainability of the travel patterns. But where I see the need for research is on the acceptability of these policies. Because what we've seen is that some of these policies were very well received in the beginning when the 15-minute city concept started, because they were seen as benign policies that had the needs of the citizens as their priority. And this discourse has changed, and now the 15-minute cities are seen by some as something that will prevent them from going to wherever they go, or from using their cars, or they are seen as threats to their personal liberty. And I think that's a very interesting topic that I'm, not only me, but there's several projects around Europe, not only mine, that are starting to focus on, okay, what has happened in the ways that we have promoted this urban planning device, and why are people against it? Mm-hmm. And this applies not only to 15-minute cities, but also with pedestrianizations, with the deployment of bike lanes. There's a lot of projects that mayors around the world are trying to implement that are consisting of improving the conditions for active transport. Active transport is walking or biking, and that entail, reducing a little bit the space of cars. And that has generated a reaction that was, I think, very much bigger than we expected. Mm-hmm. How to manage that backlash, how to promote future transformative city policies so they don't generate this reaction, I think is where the future is. I have a colleague of mine that says, in transportation research, we already know what we need to do. The future of transportation research is more on how to do it. How can we design the policies to get to where we want to go in terms of sustainability without losing the support of people? And this can not only be using climate change slogans, because climate change slogans, they don't really work that well in changing people's attitudes. They have to be more, I think, promoting lifestyles that are different from cars, making people understand that their car use, it's not the only option that they have, and that a future without cars would be more beneficial also for them in general.
Okay, that sounds like a very interdisciplinary project. And something that myself as a political scientist would be definitely interested in. Thank you very much, Oriol, for being here and for talking and for letting our viewers get a little bit more acquainted with the concept of 50-minute city.
Yes,
thank you very much.
It's been a great pleasure, and I think Bydgoszcz also has a brilliant future in that aspect. And I think the conditions are there to make Bydgoszcz a more sustainable city and a city that can advance to this 50-minute city pathway.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.